Hi, I'm Jackie.
And I'm Seth.
And this is Never TMI.
Where we talk about real things.
And nothing is ever off limits. Okay, I'm addressing the big elephant in the room. My voice. I am recovering currently from being under the weather. So it just sounds a little extra manly and deep and raspy and,
it is
aggressive.
Quite deep.
No, Kennedy, I'll talk to her on the monitor and she'll be like, okay, daddy. Okay. It's very humbling. But if you can ignore that, we will move on.
So what's the topic today?
We're talking about in-laws, specifically like parents,
yes.
in-laws, mother, father-in-law kind of thing. And I'm so excited because this is a big one that I feel like, especially when I do like a question box, so many in-law questions. Yeah.
I think I'm a little nervous about this one. Just because
it can be a touchy
we have such
subject.
Different relationships.
We do
with our in-laws, and
but it's special. Like, it's important to, like, it's just real. That's what it is. And clearly, not everyone's.
I'm not going to be real.
No,
this is
I know.
Never TMI. Come on.
I know. I'm just saying, like, in general, I think more people have a hard time with their in-laws than we think. Like, some people really lucked out and hit the jackpot, and then some people, I think, most people, I feel like they're just relationships that you have to navigate through.
Right. And I think, that's why we want to kind of talk about it, because there's the proverbial, perspective that your relationships with your in-laws is kind of just like not good. And, I think for me, when I think of it, I have the complete opposite perspective of just like my relationship with your parents has been outstanding. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that is also I've spent tons of time with them. Yeah. Having lived with them for over 3 years, and then just even being close to them, we spend a lot of time with them. So I have a very skewed perspective to the positive side of the scale.
Which is good, because there are people
absolutely. I love it. I love your parents, sir.
Yeah. I love your parents too. It's just, my experience, I guess, with your parents it's been good, but it's definitely a more growing relationship, I'll say. So like where Seth is like, man, they're awesome, so cool, so fun, whatever. Like, you haven't had to put a ton of work into the relationship.
Yeah, it's definitely been an easy relationship.
Yeah, it's just been easy
to walk into.
Yeah. So I think for me, it's just required more work. It's just a relationship, which obviously there are times that have been difficult, but there's also like the last time they were here, and this is kind of a reason we're talking about it now, is just because of the holidays, and
my parents were just here.
They were literally just here
a few weeks ago, so
it's so
definitely like a relevant topic for us, and hopefully for y'all, just as we get into the holiday season.
Yeah.
So
I think it's big, but where they just left, like the last time that they were here was probably the best for me, and I think just getting to know them.
I think too, this was the first time we had my parents come visit us instead of us going to visit them in our own space. And that really made a huge difference, I think, for us, and even for the kids, Kennedy and Evan, having the familiarity of their own home and their own space.
Their toys, their bedtime routine.
Yeah, so that I think made a huge difference as well.
Exactly. I think that can add sometimes, like, if we go there, so his parents live in Indiana, so like going there, I think there's just a sense, you're in someone else's territory, and with that, we're very different. Like, I am different from them. Our life and, our opinions and all that kind of stuff is just different. Not better or worse, not good or bad, just different. So there's kind of like this added intensity, maybe tenseness, I don't know, that can come with like being there, and that, half of it we just put on ourselves. I think it's just natural. So the last time they were here was probably the the best, just because I felt more comfortable. Just where I was in my own home and kind of doing my own thing. And we're very like make yourself at home kind of people. So it's just nice to kind of live life and then get to know them. And, you know, we rode we rode in the car. Seth rode with his dad and I rode with his mom and the girls. So it was like the girl car and the boy car. And I really just made a point to like ask questions and really try to get to know her, because we could not be more polar opposite people. And it was a gift. It was a blessing. It was good conversation. And it was like, I don't know, Seth and I always debrief after we get together with them. And it was like a hilarious conversation, just fun. And but it was good.
I was learning things about my mom that I didn't know.
Through me, because I was being nosy.
Right.
Not even nosy. Like, I just am curious. I'm like, I just want to be real. Let's talk about it. And again, that's where we can be a little different. Like, I can just dig deep, and she's like, absolutely not. That's just her personality. What were we about to say?
Well, I think too, though, and as you say that, I'm reminded, like, it's such a different relationship, because like when I think of your parents, I think of them almost as like friends.
Yeah.
But then when I think of my own parents, I think of just from my upbringing as like disciplinary figures that, yes, today I can say, you know, they're definitely friends and we're on a friendship level, but having that, you know, backstory of 18, 20 plus years.
You're like, who were you before you were my parent?
Well, of just like, of them being your parent and having that authoritative figure in your life.
Yeah.
Like, it really kind of, that shapes and changes and molds your relationship.
Yeah.
And so, like, I feel like I'm even learning my parents in a new sense now, you know, being completely independent. And I know what I've been out of the house for probably over a decade now.
Yeah.
So it's like an evolving relationship, just like any other. But, you know, from my perspective, I think that also makes it easier. Because even I think about my relationship with my parents, like, it's still, there's somewhat of the lingering effects of childhood that roll over into it. And I didn't have a tremendous relationship with my parents. I love my parents. I think they were great parents. They were my parents for a reason, the best thing for me. And we get along just
your relationship
today.
has come a long way.
Yeah.
For sure.
But it's definitely still an evolving relationship.
And I think too, like, I think I've tried to encourage you to not see them in like, you're my parent. Like, it's like, okay, you're over 30 now. So like, you can now step into that new, a new space with them, which will help, because it is still so, or it was, I would say up to like a year or two ago, like it was very like parent child, but it's like after a certain point, like with my parents, I can say things to them now that I wouldn't have been able to say a long time ago. And we do, you know, it was a very respect heavy relationship. Like, we were not those kids in high school that were like, ew, you're embarrassing me. It was like, no, you're like, I respect you. I somewhat fear you. And that took time to change, but also took like a lot of work. So I feel like you have, you're in the process of like learning your parents in a different way. And where I don't have that like fear and reverence for them because I'm not their daughter, it's just easier to kind of ask questions. And it was really fun to like, it was like, whoa, like you had a whole life, you know. I think there was like questions I wanted to ask your dad that I didn't get to ask him, but it's like, who were you? Did you ever do anything bad? You know, like, because for reference, like, they're very serious, I would say somewhat religious people. Just so you can understand. So like, it's interesting to get to know, like, who were you in high school? What kind of decisions were you making? Like, how'd you guys meet? What was your love life? And like, getting to know all that was just really fun. Yeah. And a first too, after 8 years of knowing them ish. Yeah. But anyway.
Well, and before we jump into it, I guess the way that we're going to kind of do this podcast is Jackie has received, like she said, lots of questions just through her inbox, through Instagram. And so we're going to kind of just, we've picked out a few of those questions that we're going to go, read through and just try to answer. So thank you all for giving us feedback. And we
we're
really
excited.
hope that this is somewhat of an interactive experience, even though.
And as always, we have no degrees. We are not experts. My degree is in photography.
From our experience here.
But yes, this is just like our opinion, our feelings.
But the reason we think this is important, an important topic, is because it's such a unique relationship. Like, I got to choose Jackie to be my wife. I didn't get to choose who her parents were. I didn't get to choose who my in-laws were. I didn't choose Jackie because of my in-laws.
Yeah.
But it's someone that you're then tied to for, essentially the rest of your life, the length of your relationship.
Yeah.
But really, in a lot of cases, the rest of your life, especially if you have kids and stuff like that. So it's one of those relationships that you kind of get tied to in a sense, even though you maybe don't want it, or maybe it wouldn't be your first choice, but you've made a commitment to first and foremost your spouse or your partner.
Sorry, I don't want to cut you.
Well, and I'm just going to say that brings certain struggles and challenges that you have to work through and face, and so hopefully we can kind of touch on some of those today.
Yeah, I think like with your parents, it's been such a gift, and I can like look back at different times, just different conversations I've had with people in my life, including you, just like learning how to navigate it and to see it as such a gift and a blessing and as mostly a growing opportunity. Like I remember telling my sister one time, it's like never in my life would I choose to be in relationship with, someone or people who, I don't know, bring so much tension. So like, if a relationship, it's like, we're not working, so bye. Like that's definitely my personality. That is kind of how it is. So it's like, oh, I don't like this. This is not working for me. You're like a red flag in my life, so I'm cutting it off. That's just who I am, how I am, and I'm just the kind of person that's like, oh, I don't have time for this, so goodbye. So I just would always say, like, this is so hard because I don't have a choice. But on the flip side, like my mom, for instance, her and her mother-in-law did not have a good relationship for their entire life. It was a very strenuous, difficult relationship, but I learned so much from her, and she continues to like pour into me, and just having that example of like, it was still a beautiful relationship and she grew so much from it. And then I'm sure, my dad's mom grew so much from it, but like to not just cut off a relationship that can be difficult just because it's difficult. Like there are things to learn. Sometimes adversity, like in our life, there's so much to learn. Like it's one of the most growing relationships for me because it brings out every single one of my insecurities, every single thing I need to work on personally, like my impatience or my pride or the things that, like I've had to work on my entire life. It's like, someone giving their opinions unsolicited, like, how do I deal with that? I don't like it. So I might not be the most mature in those situations. When someone else is just being themselves, like it's hard for me. I'm like, oh, I don't like that quality in you, so I'm just going to remove you from my life, and that's just not healthy. So to have the relationship, even though it's not like my choice, I have learned and grown a lot so far. And this is just like the beginning of it. But to see it as a gift and like a blessing and an opportunity, like literally before I see them, it's like how, like, let me pray about this. Let me pray myself up. How can I like love them well? How can I like be a blessing to them? How can I learn from them? Like, what can I learn from them? I think it's just like a little shift that has happened over the past few years instead of like how can I just be the least
You're like a victim
interactive
mentality.
here. Yeah, like let's get this over with. It's like, no, let's soak this up and make the most out of this because I'm going to be better for it at the end of this. That was
That's
long-winded, but
thank you for sharing that.
Of course. Thank you for thanking me.
Thank you for thanking me for thanking you.
Yes.
All right. You want to jump into some of these questions?
Yes. Okay, let's do it. I'll let you take the first one. Well, I guess see how it goes.
baby.
Okay. Okay. Number 1, do you have to fully like their parents before deciding to marry the guy/girl?
Do you have to fully like their parents before deciding to marry them? Gosh, if I'm remembering this correctly, I actually don't think I met Jackie's. I'm trying to remember the first time I met your dad. I had met them, I guess, before.
Wasn't your first like full conversation basically you asking for my hand in
well, that's what it
marriage?
was. I came to Dallas to visit Jackie's family.
Yeah.
And when I say family, I'm talking like 20 plus people here.
Yeah,
So I didn't get a lot of intentional one-on-one time with their parents.
Yeah.
I came once to visit their family, and then I visited some of your siblings just
Yes.
on and off. But your actual parents, I think my first legit conversation with your dad was the day I drove up to LA. He was coaching in LA at the time. I was living in San Diego.
Yeah.
And
I remember.
I drove up to have dinner with him to ask for Jackie's hand in marriage.
Yeah.
And so I knew 100% I was committed to this relationship. Like there was no turning back at
Whether
this point.
he stunk or not, huh?
Whether he stunk, I mean, if he would have said no, I would have probably second guessed everything in my life. But
were you so scared? Were you nervous?
I was actually I was pretty nervous.
Such a big life deal.
It is. I think I added tons of pressure to myself.
As always.
And I know we did an episode on Jackie being the daughter of a famous person, like going to meet someone that I haven't really met, who I know is famous, who I know the world knows probably better than I do.
That's funny.
Because growing up, I love football, but I was just too far removed from his era to where I knew of him, but I didn't like follow him.
Yeah.
And so I respect
You were a
him.
Peyton Manning man.
I grew up in Indy in the Peyton Manning era, so I couldn't help but not be. But like your dad, I knew so much about him from other people, but I didn't have any experience of him myself. So that's
a scary moment, but
it
went well though, right?
It went well. It did.
Sure, he's serious. I have 4 sisters, and he's very protective, so
yeah,
I can just picture it. But
so I would,
cute.
to answer the question though, I would say no, you absolutely don't. And I feel like we know a lot of people who've, even from other countries, getting married to people who their families haven't even met.
Yeah.
And
well, you're not marrying their parents; you're marrying that person.
Right,
it's like the relationship might be great, it might be absolutely awful and straining, but like they're not in your everyday.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't marry their parents.
You're choosing them regardless of the baggage that they come with.
Okay, question number 2: how to keep?
Whoa. Are you not going to answer the question?
Well, I agree with you. I agree with everything. I don't think it's necessary whatsoever. And with that, like, say you get married, that doesn't mean that those in-laws show their true colors. You know what I mean? So, like, you can't base your marriage off of if you like them or not, because they can show some crazy years down the road. It's like, it's just, to me, it's such a minute factor. Now, there are some red flags, I feel like, that would be... I think it's important to note that person's relationship with their parents, or, I think that can tell you a lot. Like, I knew Seth's relationship with his parents. I asked a lot of questions. So I think it's important to kind of be aware of that relationship, and then if they acknowledge, say like, say Seth's parents were just like on another level in some way and Seth just like wasn't aware of it or was just kind of desensitized to it. Like that would be interesting to me. That would maybe be something that was like, oh, it's a little worrisome. But no, I don't think you need to like them. If they're not your cup of tea, it's like whatever, So yeah, that's my answer. Okay, question number 2. How to keep showing up with renewed happiness, kindness, and grace when mother-in-law isn't nice. I think, again, like...
Can you read it one more time? Sorry.
Yes, how to keep showing up with renewed basically how to continue to be kind, sweet, loving when your mother-in-law isn't kind, like when they're not nice or when they're a little difficult. I think like that just, again, it goes back to like you are responsible for you and you've got to put in that work regardless. It is hard if they're not nice or if they're manipulative or if they're annoying or if they're overbearing or if they don't respect your boundaries or if they're just difficult people or just not your favorite. Obviously, you gotta, like I said, like maybe pray up beforehand or really set an intention of, like, it's not just going to naturally happen. You're not just going to naturally be like, oh my gosh, hi. Like, you have to be intentional. So I feel like, talk with your spouse and maybe be like, can you help me? Can you point out maybe when I'm not being super sweet, or like maybe I'm not making eye contact, or maybe I'm like kind of shrugging things off or shutting down. Like Seth would tell me, like, you kind of, he would point out, like, in love, like, you're kind of shutting down a little bit, or, you're not as responsive, or you're not really looking at, like, because it can be tough, like, I'm a very emotional, sensitive person, so, like, if that's the case, it takes a lot of work and effort to be kind, when you might not feel that in return, but it just comes down to, like, every single time you see them, I would say, like, making a point, being intentional about how I'm going to respond. What if she does this? What's my goal response here? Because you're going to not only grow, but you're going to set an example for her as well. You're going to set the bar, and that changes everything. When they can tell, they can get under your skin and all that, that's just not good. It's petty, and it just brings the whole relationship to a lower level. So if you want to, like, make a dent in someone's life, you just got to continue to be kind and be the bigger person.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
Good. I definitely think, if you look at the big picture of humanity, I think we have a root to love one another. And so that's way harder than that sounds. I know that. And I think, like what Jackie's saying, is knowing that, and I love the heart behind the question, because I can see that you know that and you want to show up with, happiness and kindness.
Yeah.
But you also got to know yourself, and you got to know your boundaries, and you got to know kind of what pushes your buttons. And so, like, I think if I use myself as an example, I'm an introvert to the core. And so I know that I recharge by myself. And for me to go, if I'm going to go spend a weekend with Jackie's family, I am very intentional with taking time out of those moments, and I try to be strategic. Actually, we went to the lake house. Someone in their family has a lake house a few weeks ago, and we were there for just 2 days. But like I would go and take time just to, like, step outside, or whatever I needed to do to recharge myself, or just to, like, take a quick break, take a breather, so that I could come back and then be interactive and enthusiastic and kind. And, like, I really have to work on those attributes.
Yeah.
And so I think you got to know yourself. And maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you're
extrovert.
An extrovert, and you need to go get recharged with a group of friends or a group of people. trying to, in balance, trying to do something like that fuels you so that when you are there and you show up, you can be on and be your best self.
Yes. That's good.
I think that'd be my short 2 cents.
I think last thing too is just remembering that like they are the way that they are for a reason. They're probably not trying to be mean, and if they are, then that's really sad, but there's a reason for that too, So like knowing that they were raised by their own parents, that they have their own insecurities and that they have their own reasons for being mean or manipulative or opinionated or rude or whatever, like they might be hurt over something. They might be filled with fear over something. But they just keeping yourself out of it is everything. Like it's not you. You know what I mean? It's just it goes deeper than that, Yeah.
And I think something that Jackie said a minute ago, like never grow weary of doing what's right or what's good, because in due time you will reap the reward of that. And even if you didn't, it's like the story of, there's a boulder and you're trying to break the boulder and you keep hitting it, and every hit seems like it's doing nothing until the one hit, the rock splits. And I'm not saying that the relationship is that bad or anything like that, but you don't know the impact of the attitude that you bring every time. And so I would just, for me, I have to challenge myself to show up every interaction with her family to say, all right. And I think the hardest thing for me, honestly, is it can become so casual because we live, 15 minutes from, the vast majority of her family. So like we see them often. Yeah. And it can become such a casual thing that I can easily forget, like, oh, this is just another relationship and I'm going to slack off today. Like choosing to be intentional with that relationship. And not that it has to be, you don't have to swing for the fence every time. Like, but, trying to maximize a relationship and really be intentional with it.
Put in effort. They all take work.
Right.
Intentionality. I think that's good. Okay, question number 3. Is it okay to cut off a toxic mother-in-law? Many, many chances and ruining family and marriage.
You want me to go first? Is it okay to cut off?
Take a whack at it. Pardon. Cut off a toxic mother-in-law. Just cut it off completely because there's been so many chances and it's ruining my family and my marriage.
I think I would have to ask a couple questions, but if I'm taking the question literal, if it's actually ruining your family and ruining your marriage, I think that we have a call to our marriage first before we do to any other relationship that we have on earth. And so if it's truly ruining your relationship, I think, I don't know that I like the word cut off because I never want to completely give up hope on anyone. But I do think establishing a boundary, a significant boundary that distances yourself from that relationship for the sake of your marriage, for the sake of your family, could be a healthy thing given the right circumstance. Now, if it's not actually detrimental, but it's very troublesome, I still think setting boundaries is the, it would be the thing to do. And I know we've had to do that as well in our relationships. But to completely cut someone out, something about that doesn't sit right, just for the, for the sake of having hope that, kind of like what we just talked about, like you never know if you show up and you give your best effort every time, you don't know how that could change or affect that person. So
I think I agree 100%. I think the optimisticness, optimism, I don't know, the optimism, I guess, in me,
okay,
like, is always like no, because it can work, and here's how you can make it work and all that kind of stuff. But there absolutely are those cases where, like, you know, it ain't working and it might not work, and you are not in control of them, and you can't force anyone to change or grow or want to be like someone can be hell bent on like I want to ruin their relationship. Like that's out there, unfortunately. So I do think it's possible to need to set serious boundaries and essentially cut off. And again, I hate that word too, or that phrase, but I I think in some cases it could absolutely be necessary, especially if it's really coming between your relationship. Like you got to do what you got to do, and then I think a conversation is like a sit down serious conversation, because there's so much like pettiness I think that can go on in those kind of relationships, because you don't really know each other 100% super well. So it's like you're just kind of back and forth, like, oh, I just don't like you. Oh, I can't stand you. But like, have you ever really sat down and tried to have a mature, loving conversation about like, this isn't working for me. This is really bothering me. This needs to change if we're going to move forward. I would do that before the like we're done, but I do think sometimes it is necessary.
Mm-hmm. But I think too when I hear cut off, I still wouldn't say from an indefinite standpoint. Something that I feel like I've learned is to view life in seasons, and so like yes,
for a while, for a period of time,
but to say I'm never gonna see you again.
Totally. That's a lot. It's aggressive. People change. Okay. Next question. How to navigate when your mother-in-law is disrespectful and your partner does not stand up for you. What?
You want
Sure.
Wait,
I think
how to navigate
when your mother-in-law is disrespectful and your partner doesn't stand up for you. I think.
Well, I didn't understand any of that.
This I'm somewhat passionate about, because I just feel like I always see both sides. Because with Seth, for example, those are his parents. You know what I mean? Those are people that raised him, changed his diaper, took him, drove him everywhere. Like, they love him more than anything. Those are his parents. He has, I can look at my parents and be like, oh yeah, they have flaws. But if anyone else were to point those out, if Seth were to point those out, it's a little stingy. Like it's a little harder to receive, because it's like, those are my parents though, you know what I mean? So I think I myself have absolutely had to navigate like feeling like, oh, he didn't stick up for me as much, or do I even want him to stick up for me? Like, do I want to be that overbearing daughter-in-law who's like, excuse me, like, say something, it's like, no, it's like, there's a lot that goes into it, because you don't want to look bad. You don't want to be that obnoxious wife that's just like, I can't believe you didn't say something. It's like, no, there's maturity that comes into it. There's, we're not going to die in every hill that comes into it. So I think it can be really, really difficult when you do not feel 100%. I wouldn't even say supported. I would say understood. I would say, Seth maybe didn't 100% understand our relationship. And I think, for example, he could say, she's just opinionated. That's just who she is. Mm-hmm. That's who she is to everyone. That's just how it is, what it is. And I'm over here like, no, she literally, there's no way she can like me. There's no way, she disagrees with everything I do, whatever. So like, obviously I'm sensitive. So I'm going to kind of see things a little differently, where he's like, no, he might downplay or something like that. So I think he didn't fully understand how I actually felt, because I also am not trying to like bash anyone or complain and be that wife that's just like, again, a nag or a drag. But I do think again, like having a serious conversation of like, I need you to know how this is making me feel. And I would appreciate if you could acknowledge it as well. So like that 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 went so much further than me just being like, she sucks. You know, it's like, cuz she doesn't. You know what I mean? Like that's probably not the case. I just might be misunderstanding. Like that's his mom. He knows her better than I do. So it's like, you know, where he just might, or I don't know. I feel like actually talking to you and being like, I'm really having a hard time with this. I really wish you could understand. Like, can you acknowledge that I feel this way?
Mm-hmm.
You could level with that because it wasn't emotional. It wasn't like super dramatic. It was just like a real, like you can level with me and have a real conversation with me. So I think that went a long way. And I think like you don't necessarily need, at the end of the day, you know how you feel and you know your relationship with your mother-in-law, and just little, you know, trying to let go a little bit of like forcing your husband to see your mother-in-law in the way that you do, because you don't want to like taint that relationship either, you know? Like I don't want Seth to see his mom in a negative light. It's like, that's your mom. I'm not trying to get in there. If I were immature and petty and childish, of course, I'm like, no, I want you to see this. It's like, no, it's okay. I would like for you to validate and acknowledge my feelings, but I don't need to like taint your perspective of her because that's not right. So,
But I think to that point, though, I've definitely learned more about my mom through Jackie's relationship with her and just between us. Like, she will point out things, even in my mom, that I have been blinded to, having grown up with her for, 20 plus years. And so it's like, I think sometimes it can be, I think you're 100% right, having those conversations
yeah.
to talk about, to say how you feel, because what you see or what you might be experiencing in that relationship is maybe something that I've just kind of shoved under the rug for years
Or
because
become numb to.
yeah, and so you just kind of like it doesn't ring any bells for you, or it's just like, oh, that's how she always is. But like knowing what pushes your buttons or knowing what's hard for you, it's like, okay, like I can see that, and it just gives more perspective,
Yeah.
to the partner who,
Yeah.
whose parents we're talking about.
But again, just trying to be mature about it, loving, humble. Like it's hard not to be like, I can't believe you don't support me and you just don't see it, like you're terrible. She sucks, you suck. I can't believe it. It's like, trying to remain in love and mature and just kind of understanding it might take a little bit of time to be more understood, or and not needing that validation as much as you might want it. Like maybe just like, okay, he doesn't get it still. That's okay. I'm going to continue to tell him the times that I'm having a hard time, or maybe ask him to say something, but also I think it takes just being mature in general, but like a emotional maturity to not need to like express every little thing that is really bothering you about his mom. It's like that takes a lot, but it's respectable, and your husband will appreciate it 100%. And maybe just start like praying for him to see on his own certain things so he can like better support you, but it might take some time.
And last thing I'll say to that question is, I think too, from the opposite spouse's side, who doesn't stick up for them, or who seemingly doesn't.
Yeah.
I think having a goal of like maintaining peace in a relationship. So if Jackie and my mom were, if Jackie felt like I wasn't sticking up for her, I think there's definitely a point where you just have to draw a line to say, like, I'm not going to continue to argue this issue, or I'm not going to continue to press this, and for the sake of maintaining peace in the relationship. And I think, me as the husband then who's not sticking up for her. Like, and I remember there was an instance where we had this issue come up, and Jackie felt like I was completely absent, which in hindsight, I absolutely was. But it was just kind of like, I could see both sides of the argument. Like, I was on the fence, with what it was anyways. And so it's like, but I was in the wrong because I didn't speak up to keep peace in the situation. And so, like, I think keeping that in mind when you're wanting someone to stick up for you, why do you want them to stick up for you? Is it to choose your side or to side with you, or is it to keep the peace in a relationship? And I think keeping peace is more important than saying I'm right and you're wrong.
Because I can look back in that situation and, I just wanted him to side with me, to be like, he's my husband and he agrees with me. And it's like,
but I couldn't.
He couldn't because he saw that I was not being sweet, and I was not, like, I was, he knew me.
It wasn't even the content of the argument. It was the way that you were going about it that I couldn't. It made it hard for me to just come in and say, like,
okay, it wasn't just me. It was how everyone was going about it, but I was unfortunately included in the negative going about it because I absolutely had an attitude. He knew his parents. I mean, he knew whoever was involved, and he knew me too. So it's that I didn't get like a free pass. He was like, no, you were rude. Like, you rolled your eyes. You had an attitude. You shook your head. Like, those aren't good things. And you didn't, it's not like you were like a victim in this situation. I just wanted him to like support me, even though I was incredibly hurt and really having a hard time. And, but I was like, I did not express myself well. And he, as my husband, praise the Lord, knew me and loved me and totally empathized with me. But he was also, because he loves me, because he knows me, and because he's not just going to like roll over and be like, I'm so sorry. He's like, no, you were wrong too. And here's why. So again, it takes some emotional maturity to like humble yourself and be like, all right, it's not just this person. Like, can you look at your husband and him say, you're 100% in the right. You're being kind. You're being loving and sweet. Is it just them? Because if that's, not the case, then your husband might have a harder time like sticking up for you because he's probably like, okay, yeah, why? So yeah, that's on that. And there's a question that we'll bring up kind of like the big argument in a minute, but this one is a quick little, how the heck do you relate to in-laws when you have quite literally nothing in common? That's tough, but I think
it is tough. I think you gotta
find
a way.
You gotta learn them. What are they like?
And that's the thing. Your in-laws it is a unique relationship, but it is like any other relationship. It requires work, and so.
I think being. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, really.
I was gonna say, in all, like, as polite as I can be, you got to just put in the work, and you can't take that as a cop out to not have a relationship, or at least to not try in the relationship to say I have nothing in common and I wash my hands of this.
Yeah.
Like, you got to put in the work. You got to probably put yourself in uncomfortable situations.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And it's such a fair question because I'm sure there's so many people. Like, my in-laws and I are very, very different people. But like I said, like the last time they were here, like, what were you like in high school? Did you date in high school? Like, I think you need to be yourself too, and that will help. It's not like I'm not going to try to really relate to you. I'm just going to be myself, and myself is, I want to talk about real stuff, and if you shoot me down, that's okay, but like, that's who I am. So like, let's talk about it, like, asking them questions, I think, is a really easy way just to get to know them better, and you don't have to relate on anything,
You're getting them to talk about themselves.
Yeah, and you don't need to be best friends.
Take some of the burden off of you. Like, you're not trying to carry a conversation, and you kind of can let them.
Totally.
And again, it's like any other relationship. If they're not having it, then
yeah. So you try.
Stop and come back and try again later. Like,
yeah, but I think if you don't have anything in common, asking questions for sure is. No. I think the easiest way to just kind of like get through a family event and you don't feel that pressure. Like they should feel a responsibility to get to know you as well. So if that's not happening, that's okay, but you don't need to like bend over backwards if they're not taking interest in you either. Like, it's okay, just enjoy your family and your husband, and that's it. Let's see, could you ever live with Seth's parents? What would that dynamic be like? I guess that's for me. I would never say never. Like, we've talked about this before. Like, we've mentioned it. I think it would be harder just personality-wise. I would say personality.
Circumstantially, though, it would also be hard.
I mean, that wouldn't work if we're not moving to Indiana. That ain't happening.
Moving to Indiana and then also moving into their house. Like,
logically. What? Logistically.
Yeah, there would be my parents still live in the same house that we grew up in.
So special. So cute.
Very special, but not.
It just
special, but not spacious.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think even like visiting is getting a little harder with like our kids, so we're kind of always trying to like, where can we go and like meet up, because it's getting tighter just the more kids we have and all that kind of stuff.
Not that you need space.
No,
means, but
no. I mean, we'll jam in there, but yeah, I couldn't actually see that happening. I don't think we would necessarily want to live with a set of parents at this point. If we had to, we absolutely would. But I think the dynamic would just be a little bit tense, maybe. I don't know. What would the dynamic be like, do you think?
I think it would be kind of like it was when I first moved in with your family.
Okay.
Like, you feel
out of place.
I felt out of place, and I felt like an inconvenience. I felt like an impermanent guest that's just here for a season, but you don't know how long it is, so you're kind of trying to stay out of the way. But as time went on, and the more we understood about our situation, and and that's the other thing too, we were put in a situation where we didn't really. Yes, we could have figured something else out, but living with her parents was by far the best option for us.
Yeah,
that's why we did it. So I wouldn't recommend anyone just go move in with your in-laws to do it.
But it worked out. I think it
worked out great,
to the point where Seth really wasn't ready to leave when I was ready to leave. Mm-hmm. So I think it took some time too, just to like he felt that way when we first moved in. I obviously didn't, because those are my parents, and I know they're like the least invasive, most chill people. But like, by the end of it, I mean, it was great. So I'm sure it'd be better than I think, but I would feel the way that he felt, just like, this is not my home. I wouldn't want to open the fridge. I wouldn't want to take a nap on the couch. Like, I just wouldn't probably feel super comfortable. And then I like to do things the way I like to do things, and that might be a little difficult to do under watch of someone else.
Next question.
How do you overcome a huge fight with your mother-in-law? Well, this was the one, guys. So I got the okay, obviously, from Seth to talk about it. I won't talk about, like, the contents, obviously. And again, my relationship with his family, my in-laws, have come such a long way. But I will say that his mother and I are very different. We're just could not be more polar opposites. And so, and that comes down to like personality, but also like beliefs, opinions, all that kind of stuff. We just see things differently. But there was just an evening at his parents' house that it was like the first and last like fight we had ever had. And I think it was just, I think we're better for it, honestly. I think it was just like, let's just be honest. I think both of us were feeling like, let's just get on the table what we feel. You know, we hadn't really done that. And I feel like we both just felt somewhat safe, honestly, just to like be real. It's like, look, do we like each other? I don't know. You know, at that point, like, I think we both were just like, you're not my favorite, and I was not her favorite, and it just was what it was. And I have always been, would you agree? I've always been respectful and loving towards them.
Yes.
Yes. That wasn't very convincing. I will say I've worked. What?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say in the art. Are you talking about
no. Apart from the argument.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
We were crazy.
Absolutely.
Jackie came out in that argument.
Like,
so no. But before that argument and after, I've always been very intentional to be respectful, loving, kind. Like I don't want to stir up anything. Like I just, whatever. But it was definitely during a time of like heavy things happening in the world. And I was very passionate about my stance, and she was very passionate about hers. And it is so not my personality to share like my stance unless asked or unless whatever. So long story short, we just got in a big fight. Like we were raising our voice for sure. It wasn't like, you know, I don't want to paint this picture of like people were throwing things and cussing, and that's not the case. But it was just an actual honest, aggressive disagreement, to where I was kind of glad, and I'm sure she was too, like it just was horrifying, but I think it was nice to just be honest with each other, kind of about how we felt about each other, and it was a little refreshing, honestly, and that's kind of that's my personality is, and my family. It's like we talk about it, we cry, we yell, we get aggressive. Not so much anymore, but that's kind of how it was. Like we're very okay having conversation about things. So yeah, I think in terms of overcoming it was like that next morning was scary. Like I was like, I don't know if I want to ever see them again. I'm ready to go home. We were in Indiana, so I couldn't leave. And I think number one, I got to talk to my mom, and she was helpful, and obviously was just like, all right, well, you say good morning and you be kind and you love them and don't just sit up in that room and all that. She's like, get up, go downstairs, be kind, and move on. And I think, you know, we didn't really discuss it after that. It just kind of was what it was. And I think that's different for everybody, personality-wise and all that kind of stuff. I think it would have been probably beneficial, maybe not, to have a conversation about kind of what had happened, but that is not necessarily their personality, so I was not going to push that and be like, let's, you know, I'm sure it was like mortifying for them because it was mortifying for me. And that's just how it was. We didn't talk about it again, but I think I talked a lot about it with Seth. I took time to like process. And then I think in general, it was like there was a clarity because it was like, okay, now I know how we feel. And that absolutely brought out a lot in me that I was like, I really need to work on that and grow in that. But I was not about to be like, all right, we're done. And I'm cutting them off and all that kind of stuff. It was like, no, we just got a lot of work to do. And I care about the relationship. I want a healthy, good, thriving, happy relationship, especially with my mother-in-law, with my in-laws, with my sister-in-laws. I want that, and so I'm willing to put in that work. And so I wasn't going to let one fight like ruin that relationship. It was like, this is a relationship. It's real. It's raw. It's not fun. But like, it is what it is. That's what happens sometimes. And so I wasn't going to like let it just be like, wow, there's no hope. It was like, okay, let's get up and let's continue to work at it. And we've come so far since then, 100%, to the point where I no longer will say, oh, she doesn't like me. Like, no, I don't believe that anymore. And that would have never been possible had I not put in my work. Because I can run with whatever narrative I want. So like I'm only responsible for me, and I have to put in my side of the work in order to grow that relationship and to move forward and to overcome. But it's only going to happen if I continue to love, if I continue to put effort into the relationship. What would you say?
No, I would absolutely agree. I mean, I think it would be, if I was to flip the script and say, how do you overcome a huge fight with your father-in-law? Oof. Man, that would be
scary.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a comfortable thing. I think, like Jackie's saying though, you have to face the terms of it and then move forward. And so I think the way that you went about it was great. And I think you taking into account in this circumstance the fact that maybe they don't want to, when it was done, it was done. It's not something to revisit and debrief on. Like, I know that took a lot for you because typically you want to have that
hash it out.
Well, you did hash it out, put it on the
like
the following day. It's like, let's debrief about what just happened.
Get on good terms,
right? And
real good terms.
If they were willing to do that, I think that would definitely be beneficial. But if not, kind of like what we've been talking about, just continuing to put your best effort in the relationship, and that's what makes the relationship unique. It's not just a one and done. It's like, if you had a friend who you got in a disagreement with, you might be able to just walk away and that's it. But in a relationship with an in-law, chances are you are going to see them again, come back to them again. Like, it's a longer term relationship.
Those are your kids' grandparents,
Right. So.
Okay, we have so many more, but we're gonna go with one more just because this has been long and.
Let's go two more.
Two more? We'll go quick.
Do real quick.
Okay, so this is the next one. Do you set boundaries with your in-laws trying to parent your kids? Go ahead.
Oof. Do we? Indirectly.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things that.
Yes.
Yes, I think it's something that we've found that works for us. Comes better from whoever's parent it is. So if it's my parents who maybe they're suggestive or, even directly saying like, do you do this? Why did you do that?
We think you should do this.
Yeah, I will typically feel that on behalf of us. So we always want to represent a unified front in everything that we do.
Yep.
And especially when it comes to kids and we're talking about kids. With kids and boundaries with that. And so
so he knows, and his parents know. Like his parents know that he can't come up to, or they can't come up to him and say, what? That's weird that you guys don't do this because so and so. It's like they know it's been long enough now, and we've set that boundary long enough for them to know we're united, we're together on every decision that we make. And so if you think it's weird that he is doing something or we're doing something, we both already have peace about it. We agreed upon it, and that's the way we're parenting our kids. So it's not like a prideful stance. I think we're very open to things, but I think, say, for instance, and this hasn't happened, this is just an example. If, his mom said, oh, I think you should homeschool your kids, we would say, you like you be kind and you acknowledge it, and who knows, maybe we will, you know what I mean? I don't know, but that's just an example of like, yeah, that's interesting, or why do you say that, or like we kind of shut it down sometimes. You know, some ideas will just be like, yeah, that's just something we're not deciding to do.
But I think too, we also greatly appreciate the advice of our parents.
Yes,
and so like
we honor it.
We will go to them with questions to say like, hey, how did you guys do this, or how did how did you work?
100%.
So there's definitely the balance of you pursuing them for knowledge as opposed to them putting it on you.
Yeah.
I think if you're in a situation where someone is trying to impose certain things, especially with kids, again, having a unified front and kind of fielding it on behalf of protecting your spouse and your family.
I think last thing on this, there was a situation where there was kind of a boundary issue. It was definitely at the beginning of our relationship, at the beginning of our marriage when we had kids. But this situation was enough for me to be like, oh, there needs to be a boundary set here. And, Seth, I had asked Seth, I don't want to be the overbearing, like, no, you can't, whatever, like, these are my kids. No. So it's just like, oh, would you mind maybe communicating? And he was able to go talk to his parent and have a conversation, and it was great. So like and that does not, I mean, that maybe I think happened once within all the years that we've been married and have had kids. So it was like enough to be like, oh, this is something we're going to need to set. But like it
indirectly addressing the issue.
Yeah, it's not like this massive thing, but it's like, look, we make our decisions together. Jackie and I are united, and he had that conversation, and it was great. And so I think that, again, a conversation, it is a great thing to do, a great way to approach like situations. Like, do not be afraid. Literally, do not be afraid to confront or have just a quick, easy, lighthearted discussion regarding boundaries. It's going to help them and you. And then last question, how to balance spending time with each other's family. We are always counting hours to see if it's fair, quote, end quote. Seth, I will let you go.
How to balance spending time
especially
with
during the holidays is important.
So, this is something I think that we've learned through experience. It's an evolving, it's something that's not like a stagnant, this is what it is, and this is how it's going to be forever. Because I know when we first got married, we kind of come up with the idea that we would always flip-flop major holidays, basically being Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so, like, if we spent Christmas with my family and Thanksgiving with Jackie's family, the following year we would do the opposite of that. And we did that for a little bit. That worked out well, just because, you felt like everyone was kind of you were experiencing different traditions on each side equally. I think when we had kids is when it really started to get harder for us, just because now you're traveling with more people, your cost goes up, you're bringing more luggage, you're not as
seamless.
Mobile. And so that's kind of created issues that even, we're still probably working through some of that now, especially going into this holiday season. I know that's been a big conversation for us is, are we going to go see my parents this year? How is that going to work? When would it work? And so that's just something that you kind of gotta talk through. And it's definitely hard when you don't live close to them. And that's where I know for us it can seem to be out of balance, because, we live 50 minutes from her family and a 15-hour drive from my family. So it's not always going to be an equal playing field. I think you guys have to, talk about what's that going to look like, and then, just do your best to keep the balance there. But I also think, from our perspective, my parents understand the situation, and so ideally there's going to be some understanding from their side as well, to see the bigger picture of, yes, we're not in your backyard. We are removed just geographically, and there's hurdles
it's
to
kind of
work through for that.
impossible. I think too, if your parent, for parents who, or for people whose situations where your parents live in the same place, I think every family is different. So like, if Seth's parents lived here, getting together with them would look a lot different than getting together with my family. So, naturally my family is a lot more like get together heavy and game night and movie night and this and that. So like I think understanding the dynamic is important and not feeling like they have to be 100% equal, because that might not be the case naturally. Like if his family did live here, we might see them a little bit less naturally, but like as long as we're putting in that effort into the relationship in the way that works for them, that's important. So maybe it's not a bunch as many game nights or get together Sunday dinners or anything like that, but maybe it's like getting coffee with his mom one morning. Maybe it's bringing the kids over there just to say hi. So I think putting in the amount of effort that you believe will suffice is enough, and you don't need to like break your back to make sure it's 100% fair and 100% equal,
Right.
because they're different, so I think if your families do, like if his family and your family live in the same state and it's accessible, it's okay that it might naturally, one might be a little bit more fun and outgoing and this and that, like that just might naturally be the case. I know a few of my siblings whose parents do live here, and that's just the way it is, like we're all kind of best friends, me and my siblings, and so the in-laws are very close, and it just naturally is that way. And that's okay. I think their in-laws, like they have a special relationship and they show up in different ways. So I think it's important to not put so much pressure on it, because you'll never feel like, oh, it's 100% fair. And make sure your spouse feels like good. Make sure your spouse feels like, it's okay. I feel like they feel like we love them and they're getting enough attention and effort. And if that's the case, then I don't think you need to bend over backwards.
I think too, pressure can come from two different sides. It can come from the in-laws, but it can also come from your spouse.
Yes.
So I would just, be cognizant of that. If you're the spouse that's applying the pressure,
where's that coming from?
Yeah, where's it coming from? And don't just apply pressure. Like, come up with solutions as well.
Yeah.
If it's coming from your in-laws, then maybe that's a conversation to say, okay, how could we make this work? And that's something we have to talk about. As we're coming to the end of this year.
Yep.
We're having conversations of, okay, what do we want 2023 to look like next year? What trips do we want to take?
Yep.
When do we want to take them? And knowing that we need to prioritize a trip to Indiana to see my parents. Or, this past year we met them in Branson. So we did like instead of going to their house, we met them somewhere.
Which worked really well. We highly recommend.
Yeah, having like a common, or not a common, but a middle meeting ground of some sort. That worked out well. So just kind of, planning and preparing for those situations in advance, so that you're not like at the end of the year scrambling. So like, oh, what are we going to do? How are we going to make this work?
And then being okay with it too. If the pressure is coming from your in-laws, like if you and your husband or you and your spouse feel like you've done enough and you're satisfied and you've kind of like, look, we've done what we can do and we feel good about that, then that's enough too. Like it's okay. And you there might be in-laws who are never going to be okay with the amount of times you're seeing them or not seeing them. So as long as you and your spouse are on like a united front and feel like, no, we did enough. We saw them 3 times this year. We saw them 10 times this year. We, see them once a week. Whatever works with you guys. Like you guys need to be on the same page. It, that's all that matters at the end of the day. So.
Yeah. Okay. Any
That's all we
closing
got.
thoughts?
No, okay, I shouldn't say no. I'm just excited. I feel like this is something I've wanted to like dive into with you for a while, and it's been nice. And again, like, this is just our opinion and how we feel and our experiences and all that kind of stuff. So thank you for listening as always. Like, in-laws can be tough, but man, it's such it's an opportunity, such an opportunity to grow and to work on you and your skills dealing with people that maybe don't agree with you or maybe don't like you. Like, it doesn't matter. It's all, at the end of the day, like, don't stop fighting to be better on your own, and then also to, you never know the dent that you're making, like Seth said. So it's not a relationship in vain, that's for sure.
No.
Yeah.
Good.
All right. Well,
I think.
Oh.
Well, yeah.
I didn't know if you had anything to say. Go ahead.
Well, the last thing I would say, and even just sitting here as we talk about this, I'm brought to mind the question of, in-laws. Again, it's a unique relationship. So I would question you guys to think about, and I'm questioning you as well.
Yeah.
What is the reason, if you are with your spouse or your significant other and you believe that that's the person that you're supposed to be living your life with, what then is the reason that you are also connected to their parents, aka your in-laws? So, like, what is the reason or the significance for you in your life for that relationship? You being their son or daughter-in-law, like, what do they bring to the table for you? But then also, what can you bring to the table from them? And how can you learn from that? Because I think that's what you said is invaluable. We can think of these relationships as something that's daunting or it's not a great relationship, but to flip the script and say, okay, this is actually a blessing. How is it a blessing? And asking that question and really seeing how can you serve your in-laws.
Yeah.
As
and
well as how do they
help
serve
them
you?
grow, you know? That's
and
great.
How have they helped you
grow?
Because I'm sure that, if you really think about that, I'm sure that you could name something to say, like, I've learned this or I've observed this in them, and maybe not, but I
feel like that. Yeah, that's a great point. And like, I can say with my mother-in-law, maybe she's absolutely, she's like a household queen. I mean, she keeps everything perfect all the time. Soaking her dishes, that's something I never knew, and it's something that I do every now and then, or certain ways she does her laundry, little things like that at first I was like, just let me do it the way that I want to do it. Like, I've learned from her and I've picked up from her just like homemaking skills, and I'm sure from me I'm not an inspiration in that area, but for her, maybe I've encouraged her to care a lot less about what people think about what she's wearing or what she looks like, or maybe to be herself. Like, I don't know. You never know. So it's like, but I would love to think that, like, maybe I've left a little mark or we're growing each other. You know what I mean? So that's a great, great point. I love. All right.
All right. Well, again, I'm Seth.
And I'm Jackie.
This is Never TMI, and we are signing off.
Peace out, y'all.